All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Healthspan Academy. We are super stoked to have our guest today. This is Mackenzie Mclaughlin. Mackenzie has done a little bit of everything. I feel like he's probably going to be a candidate for 30 under 30. He's an exercise physiologist at Cleveland Clinic, Canada. He started with a bachelor's in biomedical science from University of Guelph a few years ago, where he was a member of the varsity football team. And he's currently a PhD candidate in exercise phys at University of Toronto. He's also been actively involved in the student community. He's on top of that, he's president of Exercise is Medicine on campus and is the founder and executive producer of Medicine in Motion podcast. And actually, he hosted me the first time, so I'm happy to return the favor and get him in here for a discussion. We're super excited. Thanks for being here, Mac.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. Well, I want to start. Probably the most relevant topic I think right now is sort of our current climate, and everybody's been impacted in their own way. And I know you're heavily involved in a lot of different sort of disciplines right now. I want to talk clinically and academically, how your research has gone to this point, and how COVID's impacted that, and has that impacted your timeline for finishing?
Yeah, so I'm pretty fortunate in that I was able to get a lot of my data collection done before the current lockdown.
Nice.
And so there are unfortunately lots of students right now and many researchers who can't really get into the lab just because everything's closed.
Mm,
And especially with, I think, a lot of the Canadian universities and even some in the States, they're just not really taking any chances. So there's really no kind of allowance for people to go in unless they're doing code related research. And that's only a very small subset of the researchers. So I'm lucky that I was able to get most of my data collection done. I had another project that I was in the midst of that had to close down, and there was a master's student in the lab I was helping out with. He had to close his project down, and so over the past year, I was focusing on writing up my dissertation. So in a way, it was a little bit of a blessing to, I guess, have that time to myself where I'm able just to write and focus on finishing up. And then, luckily enough, Cleveland Clinic, since it's a hospital, has also been open during this time just because it's considered an essential service. And so I've been working there 1 to 2 days a week and seeing clients there. And so that's also been pretty refreshing as well. I'm able to focus on my research and then also able to interact with some people one on one and providing some guidance to them just on any recommendations that they might be able to take away to help with their personal life, whether it's typically exercise related, but maybe even some other things like sleep and whatnot.
cool. Yeah, it's fortunate. A lot of people have kind of, I mean, been dealt a pretty crap hand, but it sounds like you've been able to stay open. That's sweet, man. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about your research. So I know it's based on kind of drug delivery systems and exercise physiology. Talk about your main findings. What are you excited about reporting?
Yeah, so my research is actually it's a prime example where basically a lot of my main findings have just accepted the null hypothesis, where basically we didn't see what we hoped that we would, and while it may initially be a little bit unexciting, there are still many things that we've come to find that I think will help to push this study further. So, just to sort of orient the audience, my research is looking at how exercise affects the way drugs are uh, absorbed, distributed, metabolized, and excreted, uh, focusing mostly on distribution and metabolism. So, my first study, we gave participants caffeine and had them go into a sauna to assess the effects of heat, and then go on a bike at a low intensity to assess the effects of moderate intensity exercise. And then we really had them go as intense as possible and undergo some hit training on the bike. And basically, with these three interventions, we're trying to change the blood temperature and pH and see what that did on how caffeine bound to plasma proteins. We didn't find that that a change in blood temperature or blood pH really impacted the binding of caffeine, but we're able to kind of um, propose another paradigm to the pharmaceutical industry, pharmaceutical researchers, and exercise physiologists to maybe look at this a little bit further. Um, Another research project that we're looking at is looking at the effects of exercise on changes in the of exercise on liver blood flow and how that might impact the way drugs are metabolized. And with that, we found that basically, while blood flow to the liver may decrease during exercise, it mostly kind of impacts the way plasma volume is redistributed throughout the body. And so, with that, I was able to sort of model that with a pharmacokinetic drug model. Pharmacokinetic is basically what your body does to the drug, and so by modeling that, I'm able to sort of say, okay, well, the drug is displaced into this compartment during exercise. And then the final study was kind of just looking on the effects of inflammation on the way our liver enzymes metabolize drugs. So I used five different drugs at pretty low at pretty low concentrations, low doses, and check to see if our liver is upregulated or downregulated in response to exercise. So um, I guess my exercise is not really exercise performance related. It's really just trying to tease out, is there potentially an interaction with exercise and some of the medications that we're ingesting? And I think nowadays, people are more likely than ever to go to their doctor, receive a medication, and then maybe also receive a recommendation that they should increase exercise. And exercise prescriptions are becoming more prevalent now, which is great. But we really need to figure out, okay, what's going on if someone walks away with their doctor with a prescription for a medication and a prescription for exercise. And so, hopefully, with this line of research, we're able to come up with new paradigms of exercise and direct prescription so that maybe someone leaves their doctor's office with an exercise prescription first, with also a medication that they can slowly increase the dose of to titrate their effects to what they're hoping to get out of it.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. I think so. You mentioned the dose, and I think I'm wondering like how much of an. I mean, obviously ethics are an issue when you're looking at giving people doses of stuff. Um, is there a way that you can look at the impact at higher doses, maybe with your animal models, or is that another study in the works, or how do you work your way around that?
Um, is this in relation to the third study I talked about where we gave very low doses?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used low doses, and um, it's I guess it is considered a microdosing study. A lot of people hear about this microdosing
Mhm.
sort of aspect, mostly with like psilocybin and mushrooms and stuff like that. But microdosing, the definition of it is if you're giving someone 100 micrograms or 1/100th of a therapeutic dose. And so most people aren't actually microdosing; they're more like mini dosing.
Mm.
Um, but so with my study, some of it was microdoses and some of it was 1/10 of the therapeutic dose. And the reason I did that was to get through ethics, just because
Mhm.
ethics is pretty difficult to do. And so, yeah, if you wanted to circumvent that, you totally could use animal models. And a lot of that research has been done in the 70s. Sometimes they used dogs, sometimes rats,
Mhm.
and you could use a higher dose in that way. For my participants, since they're healthy individuals, I don't want to give them therapeutic doses of five drugs.
Yeah.
Although, maybe we would have seen a bigger difference that way. But this is kind of, assessing the utility of using microdoses in research, and can we measure changes in enzyme activity with this? So, again, even though we have to accept the null hypotheses for a lot of these investigations, the techniques that we use do kind of open the door to more research using them. So,
Yeah. That's my one of my I guess the silver lining in academia is you're even if the results don't pan out, you're still setting the pathway through the methods you're developing. I think that's like the nitty-gritty of the research that you don't hear from the outside is the methodology, like the time and effort that goes into developing protocols and all that stuff. So at least you're saving people those steps that they're coming in after you. Cool, man. That's very interesting.
yeah, thanks. And yeah, it's even though there's developing the protocol and making sure it works, there's getting that protocol through ethics.
Yeah.
For to use one of the drugs in my study, I had to get that approved through Health Canada, and so that added on 6 months to a year in that entire process. I don't like to think about that part too much,
Yeah.
but it's part of research.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but yeah, it sounds like it's coming together.
It
Awesome.
sounds like a worthwhile topic. Yeah, I know you in your research paper there, I read through it, and you talked about 50% of Americans, currently ingest some sort of prescription medication, and exercise and understanding that the reliance on this medication is something that we don't, you know, hopefully through exercise and through proper nutrition and through a lot of natural ways we can, slowly wean people off of their prescriptions, and that's definitely a proactive approach, and sounds like something that you definitely took into consideration.
And all medications obviously have their time and place for use. Um, and the thing is, most medications have side effects. So if we
Mhm.
can somehow reduce maybe the dose, increase the efficacy, and reduce the chances of any of these side effects, because that's the main thing that really impacts a lot of people. So that's with this new paradigm of maybe we're giving this medication with exercise, maybe it's more effective that way, maybe not. In some cases, that's what some people report, but um, typically overall you are getting a little bit of a beneficial effect from exercise on its own, and then it may also be able to affect the pharmacokinetics, the absorption, distribution, metabolism of some of these drugs. So,
Awesome. Switching into a little bit more about exercise, kind of pre and post things to do. Maybe recovery. Some questions we have. Uh, for our listeners, I know you deal with a variety of people at different fitness levels, all the way up to athletes. What can you tell us that are some of the more common or important things to do kind of pre and post exercise, and then we'll get into a little bit more recovery techniques and things that our listeners could use practically in their day-to-day exercise routines.
yeah, for sure. Obviously, a proper warm up and proper stretching pre and post exercise are pretty vital in order to sort of get your body prepared for exercise and also to help recover for the next day. And so typically what I like to do is maybe a 5 to 10 minute run. This would be sort of pre-COVID when I'm in the gym. Now I kind of just run every day, but we'll circle around back to that. But a 5 to 10 minute run just to sort of increase your heart rate, increase the temperature of your muscles, which sort of increases their ability to stretch. And then going into a bit of a dynamic warm up. And a dynamic warm up is basically when you're stretching the muscle by putting it through a range of motion. And so some people might be thinking of ballistic stretching. I believe that's the proper term, but basically where you uh, are extending a limb and then you're kind of bouncing into that stretch. And that's not really what I'm referring to. If people can kind of think of a lunge, that would be a static stretch. But then if you do a lunge and walk into another lunge and then walking into another lunge, you're putting those limbs through a range of motion while also getting a stretch. And so that's typically what you want to be doing before your workout so that you're not really inducing any micro tears to the muscle that might impact your ability to squat or other things. But it's really increasing the range of motion to protect it later on from any potential tears. And then afterwards, really just, and I try my best to get some of the static stretches in. Obviously, it's a workout can take quite a bit longer when you're trying to incorporate all these things, but I try and get the main stretches for my legs after a workout. And by static, that's when you're actually holding the position for 20 to 30 seconds or an extended period of time. And so after workout, I typically will try to just hit the my legs with kind of a hip flexor stretch, a hamstring stretch, and a glute stretch, and hope that that kind of hits it all. I think that some people they associate coffee with sort of something that they have in the morning, but if if motivation to work out is a bit of a factor, then splitting up your coffee intake throughout the day so that you do have some in the morning to prepare yourself for the day. And then if you're someone who works out after work, maybe taking 30 minutes to yourself just to decompress and then having coffee at that time as well, just to sort of uh, prime yourself and become, and elicit maybe a little bit more motivation to undergo some of that exercise later on. And so some people don't really think of caffeine as sort of a stimulant for exercise. They think of it as more of a stimulant for work, but it's a great stimulant for exercise if it doesn't impact your sleep later on. So that's
I was
something that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, are you offsetting some of the effects of caffeine as you exercise? Like, you're, increasing your digestion of it. I'm not sure. I've never really read on anything on it, but
Oh, like going back to the pharmacokinetics of it.
yeah, just wondering if you guys. I know you talked about caffeine in general, and you guys didn't find, that it really was affected too much by, temperature or exercise. But is there anything you can tell us that way?
Right. So, going back to this study, basically, all drugs in the body are attached to plasma proteins. And if they are attached to these plasma proteins, that kind of protects them from acting on a receptor in your body. So, caffeine acts on the adenosine receptor. It's an antagonist, which is basically just a fancy way of saying that it blocks the effects of adenosine on its receptor. And so, we were looking to see, okay, does this change in temperature and blood pH affect the amount of caffeine that is bound to these plasma proteins? So if more caffeine is free, then more is able to bind to that adenosine receptor. If less is free, then it's going to be less effective.
Okay, so doesn't it doesn't play a part in whether you metabolize it quicker or sleep better, kind of depending how much caffeine's in your system afterwards. Like, I know
R-
that varies greatly depending on the person, anyways. But
Yeah, there's a few other factors to consider. So that
right,
was basically just how well is it bound to proteins in your blood. There's also this cool thing called the Q10 effect, or the temperature coefficient, where basically enzymes work better as the temperature increases up to a certain extent. But that's another thing we also looked at is the clearance of caffeine affected by the person's temperature. And so, as their temperature would increase, the activity of these enzymes would increase, and then maybe the clearance of caffeine would increase as well. And we used a pretty small window of assessing this, and we didn't see it. Some research has shown later on that maybe the levels of caffeine change, but that's an area of research that I'd like to circle back around to and really tease that out. But basically, the effects of caffeine on the body uh, sort of um, it's augmented by the effects of exercise. So some people might find that exercise is stimulating, caffeine is stimulating, and they feel really good when they're exercising after a cup of coffee. And
right.
that's why these pre-workouts have caffeine in them, because people feel,
Mhm.
pretty stimulated and pretty confident from the effects of both.
Right. Getting back to recovery, just quickly, a couple more questions. You said you stretch right after, like a static stretch, kind of stretch those major muscles that you worked out. Is that something that you're aiming to do, like within 5 minutes, within 10 minutes after your exercise?
Yeah, I don't have it down to a specific timing, but definitely right after exercise, just so that your muscles are still warm and they do have that elasticity that allows you to take advantage of stretching them past where you'd normally be able to when they're cold.
And does
Um,
Sorry,
yeah,
I was gonna say, does this directly affect like how sore you are the next day? I know a lot of people have the misconception that the soreness is caused from a lactic acid buildup, or the soreness is caused from tearing muscle fibers. Is there any like light you can shed on that, and what people can do to really mitigate the soreness, or is that just like the practice makes perfect sort of thing?
right. So, with regards to the lactic acid, so lactic acid is formed from the anaerobic metabolism of of some metabolites in the glucose pathway. And uh if you like, sometimes I think there's a couple of theories out there that say that lactic acid can sit in the muscle and hamper it that way. um what you can do is cycle after exercise for a little bit amount of time at a low intensity, and that'll help to cycle lactate back to the liver, and then basically your liver will convert that into pyruvate, or a non-lactic acid pathway, and so that can help with recovery.
Like you're saying, get
um
on a cycle, like a bike,
yeah,
or
and you can do
like
that for 5 to 10
walking.
minutes.
Can you kind of walk or
Y-
just
y-
anything?
I like
yeah,
cardio.
walking is great as well, as long as it's aerobic and you're getting some of that blood flow.
Right.
We did a study looking to see if we could augment, and this was actually published like this past week, which is kind of cool. But we're
Nice.
looking to see, are there any supplements where we can augment the recovery of lactic acid or lactate, which is what it is in the blood. And we didn't really see much of a change, but what we did find was that active recovery, which is that sort of low intensity cycling or walking or even just jogging, that does help to facilitate clearance of lactate. And so that can help to sort of, if you find that you're sore after a workout, that might help to sort of clear some of the lactic acid and facilitate its removal. And then obviously pairing that with some stretching after might be good as well. And it's for everyone. And I really stress this, is that if you are starting exercise for the first time in a while, like you're going to be sore, it's going to be uncomfortable, and it's going to kind of suck. And that's your body basically just saying like, hey, like, what's going on here? This is different. I like routine. I don't like what's going on here. But it's and I'm sure you guys can obviously speak to habit forming as well. But once you kind of break through that 2 to 3 week mark, and you kind of realize, hey, like, this is exercising is easier. I enjoy it. It doesn't hurt as much. Your muscles are a little bit more resilient. Then that's when really exercise becomes really rewarding, and it really is just sort of getting through that initial part. Yeah.
Yeah.
Until the gyms get closed down and I don't have a barbell at home, and then I go do
Yeah.
back squats, and then it repeats itself all over again. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm
yeah.
not looking forward to when gyms open and I got to go through that all over again.
But I
But
Obviously.
try to keep up at home anyways, and I
Yeah.
definitely have a good routine going. But
Nice.
mhm,
Mac, I want to dive into the exercise as medicine initiative because I've been involved with that a little bit here at the Guelph department for Anthony, who's a
mhm,
mutual friend of ours. And I love that initiative because it's basically the premise is that exercise is a preventative means of, basically keeping our health afloat, which is, there's tons of research supporting that. And I think it's the healthcare systems, practically functions more as a band-aid than it does as a preventative thing.
mhm.
So I am firmly on belief with the whole philosophy behind it. So I want to talk about that initiative and how it's changed in in light of COVID, right? So now we're without um, gyms for the most part. People are having to work out at home. How much have your efforts changed in that philosophy since
Yeah.
COVID hit?
Yeah. So I think when you guys were introducing me, you said that I'm the current president of exercise medicine at U of T. I am now an advisor.
Okay,
So I was president for 3 years. It was awesome. I loved it.
cool.
But I'm going to be graduating this year, so
Yeah,
I've been trying to shuffle in some younger talent so that they get some reps at it, and once I'm no longer a part of it, they're able to take it over. But we have been. It had okay. Obviously, COVID has presented some challenges. We used to be able to do a lot of in-person activities. We used to be able to do a ball hockey tournament, yoga. We would have these interprofessional education events, and it has been pretty challenging with the inability to do all of that. And so we sort of shifted a little bit, and we started to post online workouts on Instagram
nice.
that people could follow those at home. And I know that your gym has done that as well. And it's,
Hmm.
we got to take advantage of sort of all this technology that we have, where we're able to do stuff
Absolutely.
at a distance. And we've had some online presentations as well. And so we partnered up with the University of Queens recently, and partnered with them on basically the updated guidelines on sedentary activity, sleep, and exercise. And we have also done a couple calendar challenges where basically, and I think it's kind of like a bingo card that you have on your Instagram, and you try and fill that out with activities throughout the month.
Cool.
Yeah, and then
Sounds like
also
a great
just
initiative.
yeah, but it's been tough, and so we're just trying to make the most of what we can given the limitations.
Yeah, fair enough. So on that note, I want to dive into your personal habits. I know you've been a gym nut since I met you, which I guess is going about 8 years ago or so. And we're all kind of challenged right now. When I met you over the years, we've had biohacking conversations and ketogenic, and you've done a mix of all this stuff and biohacking. What is your focus now? What is your main would you say, priority with your health and fitness? And what does that look like in terms of you focusing on nutrition? You're more focused on mobility, you focus on strength conditioning. Where is your head at right now with that stuff?
Right. Great question. So I think for a lot of people, when I started, it was all about aesthetics, and in terms
Hmm.
of just kind of, especially in high school, where that stuff might sort of be a little bit more important, and also for football and training for that. Now, exercise is all for just the mental gains and the cognitive boost. And so I would say the two biggest things that I get from exercise are an increased cognitive ability and just greater confidence. And I think those two things really touch on a lot of other aspects of life. Um,
Absolutely.
and um, yeah, in terms of, so my routine now, just because gyms are closed, I try and get outside and be active every day. And so typically that'll involve either running or biking. And that's really just to help break up my day and make sure that I get outside. And I find that that's really beneficial mentally, especially with the lockdown and the restrictive measures that are in place in Ontario. You, you know, you're inside all day, and it's very easy to not step foot outside. And so right now, I just find that my day, I can break it up, and I get a little bit more of a boost later on when I do go out for a run or a bike. And I just find that that really helps with my ability to think, my energy levels, and my confidence. And I think that's pretty key right now. And so I guess this is a long way of saying that my focus now is just sort of on keeping mentally sound, and making sure that exercise really is kind of geared towards really improving my confidence and my cognitive ability. And that's typically right now just through aerobic exercise, because that's the only way that I can get out.
Fair enough. That's a
Long
yeah.
term health.
Yeah, I love that answer because I think that's the piece that gets lost for a lot of people. They think exercise is just going to stop them from getting a heart attack, but it's also going to keep your mind sharp and happy and healthy. And I think if more people were exercising, we probably have a lot less issues with mental health, um,
And
clinically.
sorry,
So
just to jump in here, Craig, but
yeah,
and I'm sure like this exercise changes for everyone, and depends where you are in your life. And so I know that in um, 30 to 40 years from now, it's going to mostly reside around making sure that I'm mobile
for sure.
and that my independence is maintained. And so obviously it changes from when you first get into the gym to later on in life. And wherever you are, exercise is going to be beneficial.
Hmm.
It's going to really help out any aspect of life, and especially whatever you're focusing on, exercise is going to help out with that part of it. And so right now, I do it for the mental health aspect and the psychological benefits. And so, if you're someone who wants to uh, take advantage of some of those protective effects of cardiovascular disease, or uh, maybe reduce any chances of type 2 diabetes, then exercise can help with that. And it really does just affect every sort of physiological system that we have.
I want to be
Yeah.
able to golf the rest of my life up until 100 at least. So
Hmm. Hmm.
I honestly I think about that every time I do something. So mobility, stretching, like obviously maintaining muscle, especially with type 2 fibers, for as I progress in my age. But that mobility thing, like you can think about how hard golf can be on your spine and on the rest of your body. And so if I reverse engineer that, that's kind of how I structure my exercise regime. And and in doing so, it keeps me healthy and happy and all those great things. So
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mac, I want to finish up with a reference. I know you've picked up a lot of you have a lot of mentors over the years in the world of biohacking and in exercise phys, and um, it doesn't have to be anything recent, but and what's a reference that's kind of been impactful for you over the last like 12 months? A book, could be a book, it could be a course. What's something that we can go out and pick your brain with?
Yeah. Um, Great question. I haven't, so I'm pretty bad at remembering jokes and remembering certain quotes. But a book that my supervisor got for me that uh, I've been reading and really enjoying is this book called Endure by
Nice.
Alex Hutchinson. And that's basically just really challenging our preconceived notions about what the human body can do, and basically showing examples of people overcoming profound limitations and barriers. And that's just really opened my eyes on basically what the human body is capable of. And it's been a really enjoyable book to read.
Have you ever read David Goggins?
I have him
The other
on,
extreme.
yeah, on an audiobook. And I will circle back around to that. I was listening to that for a bit, and then I got this book, and I will be able to go back to his book again. But listening to his childhood
Yeah.
was uh, pretty profound, and you could really understand why he's developed the character that he
Mhm.
has through his experiences.
Exactly. Exactly. I know I do hill sprints and I usually do 10 and then I get to the 10th one and I'm like, why can't I do 11? And it's usually because of David Goggins. That's about all I got out of that book.
Got the voice in his
Other
head.
yeah, that voice in your head that
Yeah,
tries to tell you to quit. And then the difference between quitting and not quitting is just whether you listen to that voice. It's pretty crazy,
100%.
but
Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Awesome. Well, Max, thanks so much for your time today, bud. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
so much, Craig and Kyle.
Uh,
It was a lot of fun.
awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
appreciate having you.
Where can people learn more from you, Mac?
Um, I would say probably just following the Medicine in Motion podcast. That's where we're interviewing experts and professionals on specific topics related to exercise. So we just released a series on exercise during the pandemic, and then also following exercises medicine on campus at U of T, and we release a lot of stuff through there as well. On my personal Instagram page, I don't really. I mostly just release stuff that I'm doing at the time, so it's usually running or exercise related. But unfortunately, I don't really post too many tips, just because I don't really see myself as as an influencer in that regards.
No
But
worries.
I think through exercise medicine and medicine in motion, that's probably the best way.
Awesome.
We'll put links in the show notes so people can link up with you, man. Awesome.
Okay, sounds
Appreciate your
great.
time, Mac. We'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
Take
Thanks for
care.
listening, guys. Talk soon.